Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Well, today we're going to have part 4 of our Poulan Wild Thing, or Poolan, whichever you want to call them. Got it running and stuff. We're going to do a few things to it, but what we're going to do first, we're going to service the bar, file the chain, and do a few things like that. And we're going to run it in a completely stock form. And then, on the next video, we're going to do some modifications to it, just simple ones, and then we'll time the cuts and see if any of them really change the performance of the saw or not. But the only modification I've done so far is on the chain oiler, which is right back here. If you look down here, you can see all this oil on the table. Well, I was tuning it earlier, and so you can see it's oiling quite well. And inside of here, there's a little rubber piece that changes the direction of the oil and goes into the tank, and all you do is drill it out just a little teeny bit, and it increases the oil flow pretty dramatically, which they need, because the bar on this thing, and whoever had it never ever flipped the bar. They just ran the same rail all the time, and you can see that there's these sharp edges, and you turn it around and none at all. But it's got some nice spots here and down here in the very tip. It's actually eaten away a little bit, so I'm just going to do a minor service on it today, because I'm going to put a new bar and chain on it, and that'll be part of the test in the next video on it. So anyway, I'll get the oil cleaned off and be right back. Okay, well, we're back. So the first thing we're going to do is clean the slot here. You can see there's a little bit of oil and sawdust in there. Get that cleaned out, and then the other thing is right where the oil comes in the bar here. Those are plugged also, so we're going to brake clean and wash that out of there. Okay, well, the next thing we're going to do is put the vise on this, and hold this down, and then file that lip off it. Should say C-clamp here. Nice vintage C-clamp here. So much better than the new crappy Chinese junk. Like I say, there's a lip here. You can bump it all along. I'm using a lot of different styles of files. This is kind of neat because it has a single cut, and then on the back side is a double cut. And for doing a filing on these, it's a lot better with a double cut. This is a Simmons file. I don't think they're in business anymore, but I bought a bunch of these new old stock at a junk sale. Boy, they're superb. The new stuff you buy is such junk. It doesn't take much to take that off. Get back here. Okay, well, we'll be back when we're done. Okay, well, we've got it all filed. Bring it up here, and you can hold it just right. You can see that fine edge there. That's where the metal was rolled over. That's been removed, so it's nice and smooth now. So the other thing we're going to check is how wide the rails are here. It's supposed to be 50 thousandths, so let's see what it is. Okay, the rails are just a little bit wider at 55 thousandths, and I don't run mine at 50 thousandths, that's too tight. I oil better. I put them at 52 thousandths, have just a little bit of rock. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to lube the sprocket on the end with our little grease gun specifically for this job. You want to rotate the sprocket while you're doing it. You can see the grease is starting to come out there already. But, you know, it's interesting when you work on something like this. You know, the person who ever had it knew nothing about chainsaws because they never flipped the bar in between filing them. And there were several chains with it, so I think when the chain got dull, they just put another one on there rather than fix it and sharpen it properly. So anyway, I'll get set up here and we'll come right back. Okay, now if I was going to do a real full service on this bar, what I do is take a marker pen, clean the rails off, and then darken them on the top here, the full length. And this is a bar file. Got a little file in here. This piece goes up against the bar like this, and then you just dress it. And so it took the black marks almost completely off right away, so it's not too bad. So the next thing I'm going to do then, I'm going to do the chain. Now this is a crappy safety chain. I went over these in the earlier video, so you can go back and watch that and give you all the good BS on these. But this is a 3/8 low profile. And it's got the safety raker on it, which I refuse to use, except for like in a fun video like this one, but for actual work it's worthless. But you know, if you're a person who has no experience with chainsaws, like the guy that owned this, it's probably a good idea because they don't kick back. But you know, it's a small, low horsepower saw, so I mean, it's really shouldn't be any concern anyway, unless you're doing something really stupid. But anyway, what we'll do is, you know, back here the chain will rock a little bit, down towards the front a lot less, so we'll be cutting them here. And you always want a reference point, so we'll start with one and mark it. And I use an orange marker pen rather than a red one, so if you cut yourself you won't know where your reference point is. But by using the orange one, you know that it's not your blood, it's probably from Ramtha's lizard people or something. My former neighbor told me all about them. So anyway, this is what I use. This is the slickest setup for finding saws than anything else. There's a company in Germany called Pherd. It's P-H-E-R-D, makes these. And what it does, has little marks here so you have the proper angle when you're filing. It has a round file on the bottom for cutting the tooth, and it has a flat file here that also cuts the rakers at the same time. Now in a chain like this one, where I have no knowledge of how good it is, you know, the chain rakers that gauge the height of the cut here can be different heights because of damage and different things like that. And so for the initial cutting I use what's called a raker gauge. You put this on over the teeth like this, and if this thing is raker sticking up, which it is, I have to find my file here. So you put that on there and get it set. And it just takes the very top off. So this one is set at 25 thousandths between the top of this and the cutting tooth. So I'll go ahead and do that and then we'll be back. Okay, well, the rakers weren't too bad, but they're all different heights, and that's why about every fourth time I sharpen a chain I go ahead and use the gauge and the file to get them all equal. because even though this tool works really slick, if you have a raker that's a lot higher than the other ones, by the time you sharpen the tooth, it's not going to be down enough to have them all equal. So chain just cuts a whole lot better when they're the equal height. So we'll come over here and show you what it looks like. Okay, this one I just touched up, and you can see that nice shiny metal there. When you have the gauge on here, and you take the file and go across and it doesn't hit it, then you know that it's just a little teeny bit there, but that's how you tell if it's down all the way or not. Now you can see on the next one here, it hasn't been done at all. So we'll just do that real quick. Always remember to pick your file up and don't rake it back, it knocks the teeth off them. Okay, well, we got one left here. And when the file sounds nice and smooth, you know that it's done. Always makes a rough noise when it's still cutting. So anyway, you can see that all of them are done. So the next thing we're going to do is start cutting the teeth. So there again, we've got our reference point here, so we're going to start here. And since the chain has the least rock up towards the nose here, we'll do that. So we'll be back in a second. Okay, and these are little reference marks here, so that when you're in the tooth and cutting, you want those parallel with your bar here, and you want to have a little bit of a down angle on it also. So you can hear that's fairly coarse. Pick it up, take it out. There used to be a lot of books and different things that talked about how to sharpen these things, and you have to do the same number of cuts on each tooth. Well, that's nonsense, because some teeth get worse than others now. When I first started cutting, it was pretty coarse sounding. Now it's just nice and smooth. So that tooth is nice and sharp. Yeah, very sharp. So anyway, we'll continue along, and then when we're ready, we'll just turn the bar around and go back and do the other side. But like I say, it's this is the fastest thing I've ever used. This chain's pretty dull. Okay, well, we get all the rakers cut and the teeth all filed. One thing I wanted to talk about just briefly again on your filing, I, like most people, just started out with a round file like this, and it takes a while to get proficient at it because there's a certain angle you need on these. You can move it around different places, and I always found that using these, I always cut one side better than the other. But whenever you're using any file, this one or one that's got a guide plate on it like this one or the Pherd, after about 4 or 5 cuts, rotate about a quarter of a turn, you have nice clean teeth to cut the teeth on the chain here, and the vibration will knock the debris out, because if you keep going and stuff like that, the chain will put the debris in here and it won't cut very good. You can take them off and tap them like that too. But now these are pretty good too. I don't know if you can see all the stuff on them or not here, but they have different angles marked on them. Different chains use a different cutting angle, and then this keeps it from going down too deep and cutting the gullet. But I didn't use these very much. I didn't like them personally, but there's lots of different ways to sharpen chains. You know, if you're a pro, this is what they usually use. You can take it out in the field, doesn't take up any room. And the teeth that I use on my chains are round profile, which I like because it's easy to find a chain for them and it's easier to sharpen. The square tooth ones require a lot of different skills and some different tools to do them, and you know, that's more for professionals who have to have a saw that produces absolutely perfectly all day long. And instead of us just like it, use a saw occasionally, although I use mine a lot, usually every month of the year. So anyway, that's just kind of an overview. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to put the bar and chain on the saw and get it ready to cut. But there's one other thing I wanted to go over real briefly. I'd say we're going to be doing some modifications at some point. But there was a lot of carbon in the exhaust system on this saw. There's a lot on the piston. Actually, the bore has some very light scoring on it from that. So we did some pictures with a bore scope, which we'll show you in a bit here. But I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the features here. Get this thing apart here. I'll be right back. Okay, well, we got the muffler off and apart. I think it's kind of interesting on this, and when I took it apart initially, the spark arrestor screen here was pretty much plugged. And this fits inside of it. It's got holes in here, and some people have modified these saws and hop them up, also put them here, but I think that's plenty of area for the small amount of port area. One thing I really like on this saw, which is one of the very few things, it has a port liner. And Poulan, or Poolan, calls it a heat shield, but all the carbon was in that and none inside the cylinder, which was nice. So other saws should have that too. But the exhaust on this thing is pretty weird because the outlets are just these two little teeny holes here. Really restrictive, and some guy sent me a message that he knew one of the engineers at Poulan that was talking about this saw in particular, and the EPA put so many regulations on it they couldn't really make a performance saw out of it like they wanted to, but the port timing on it is pretty advanced, so if it's hot, you know, it can cut good if it's exhaust restrictions and other things are done on, which we'll do in the next video. But since this is up at the top, the exhaust outlets here, this goes in like this and the exhaust goes down, loops up around, and then out these little ports out the back. So we're going to change that when we start hopping it up. So anyway, we'll get it back together and take it out and give it a nip or two. Okay, well, you can see how nice and clean the port is because this took all the carbon and it was really easy to clean. So anyway, get the saw back together. Be back. Well, we're just about done here. Got this on. A couple of things that when you're tightening up your bar, you know, the chain's still loose. You want to have it up all the way because if you tighten it when it's down, when you start cutting, it's eventually going to move up till it stops, and then the chain will become real loose. So always do that. Lift it all the way up. And get this adjusted up here. You want to have it snap down like that. I'll have to run it some and then readjust it, I'm sure. But I also put chain lube down in the rails here before I put the chain on, just so that it's got a nice transition there. It won't be metal to metal. Do our final tightening up here. I'm going to go back and forth and tighten them evenly so they pull down nice and square. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to put the air filter in. One of the other few features on this saw that I like are these screws that hold the side covers and different things on. You can use a straight edge screwdriver on them, or you can use a Torx bit, which is those splines. The Torx actually gives you a better grip on them, but that's just a nice feature. Amazing on such an inexpensive saw that it actually had a few redeeming values there. So anyway, we'll get it all put back together, and when we come back, we'll take it out and give it for a road test. Okay, well, one thing on this saw, like I say, there's a fair amount of carbon, you can see in the pictures, and the Echo Red Armor partial synthetic 2-stroke oil is supposed to remove carbon. So we're going to try it out. We're going to run 3 or 4 tanks through it, go back with the borescope and see if it actually works or not. But a lot of people have gotten really good reviews with this, and there again, I always use partial synthetic on all saws. I don't have any new ones, because the new ones, most of them say use full synthetic, but these old saws have bigger clearances in them and stuff, and so you need a partial synthetic. I've talked about in some other videos you can go back and watch. So anyway, there we are. Well, this will be the end of part 4. Got it all ready to go. Got it tuned hopefully good. So what we're going to do is 4 timed cuts, and the saw is completely stock. It's got the safety chain on it. The muffler's not been modified. Air cleaner system's not been modified. It's just completely stock. So fire it up and do the cuts here. Okay, well, my conclusions are pretty much what I thought. A little bit underpowered. The safety chain doesn't cut very good, but that's a known factor in working with these crummy chains. Anyway, for our next video, which will be probably about 3 weeks or so, we're going to do some modifications, and then we'll go back and do cuts. We'll do each modification, go back and do cuts. Time it against what it took to do today, and then the last, we actually have a new standard chain for it, so we'll see the difference between a safety chain and a standard chain, see how much better it cuts. So we'll see you in the video down the road.